Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fife Property Saturday Morning Show. Jim, you're joining us from afar, or well, I say afar. You're only where are you?
Glasgow.
Glasgow.
Hey, I'm right next door to the Scottish Conservative Party conference going on right now. Michael Gove just walked past me last night, and a few others, and I was feeling like chipping in for the landlord.
we just spoke off camera, and I'm like, please don't go and join in. But anyway.
I had visually just confronting them, and I was like, I know I see Patrick Harvey, but I was thinking to myself, I wonder if I should get my mic out sometime and I just like confront Patrick Harvey while he's at his breakfast. Maybe go to the Scottish Greens conference and confront him at his breakfast. What are you doing about private landlords?
Yeah. So today's topic, we are discussing choosing a letting agent, and we're going to cover the 5 signs of excellence that will help you pick the best one that's for you, because maybe not everything is right for every doing things and people do differently. So I think that's important to find the one that's right for you. Am I losing connection a wee bit? Yeah.
Yeah, but just keep going.
Yeah. So having a letting agent who fills you with confidence is an essential part of being a landlord or an investor. Whether you're obviously an old hand and been at it for years, or you're just starting out, it's really important to have that confidence in whoever's dealing with. I mean, basically, they're going to be letting and potentially managing your assets, your tax-free assets that you've invested your money in. So you need somebody that's going to be doing it properly and have confidence in them doing that. And how you choose who to work with, and when you've got no idea what agents are supposed to be doing, it's really like you've been giving them free rein, and once you've given them the keys, you give them free rein to do that, and you only find out then. So there's ways and means of finding that out beforehand, and there's telltale signs that make it really easy to spot the best letting agents. And these are things like expertise, their enthusiasm, their integrity, their attention to detail, and
definitely,
and their competence as well.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
These are all the star qualities I think that you need to really look for in an agent. And today we are going to explore them in a bit more detail and advise you on how you could use them to pick the best letting agent that's for you and build that relationship that could last for years. I mean, I've got relationships with landlords that I've had.
I like Richard, the potential. You know, you're absolutely right, the potential. And just to give you an example of how we keep evolving and keep learning and keep constantly, what would I say, training, if that makes sense. You know, Stephen Brown actually trains us every other week for the Lettings division. But equally, I sit down with a lot of the team now, and I'm sitting down with Charlotte right now, and we're going through every single week about what my expectations are with my portfolio. And that rubs off on everybody else's portfolios as well, and properties. So, and you know, I've got quite high standards in terms of what I do, and quite high expectations as well. But you've got to understand, though. I mean, you know, Charlotte's been here for what, 2 or 3 years, possibly.
3 years at the end of this year.
Well, there you go. So Charlotte's been here for 2 or 3 years, but still, it's all about learning. It's not just about appearing and thinking that you've done it for a year and that's it. You're an expert in it now. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing. Well, not constantly changing, constantly adjusting and adapting to the current environment and the techniques available to do things like property management, credit control, and also liaising and communicating with landlords. Something which I'm obviously have to still work on. I read skills with people quite a lot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, that's 13 years just about that I've been doing this, Jim. And like times like just now, with all the current legislation changing and new things brought in terms of the safety aspect and compliance, and it's a continual learning curve. And I sometimes need to sit down like, right, I need to like look at this and make sure this is right. You're never an expert in something that continually changes. You could only be the best as you are with what you are at the time.
Exactly. See the one thing, it's like when you go into the Scottish Government's website right now about, you know, at what point can you evict a tenant and what reasons can you evict a tenant for? It's like there's a complete mismatch.
Yes.
They've got one story on one page and they've got another story on another page, and actually they match with each other. It was a calamity. You know, so and the only reason I was asking that is because a landlord actually wants to sell their property, and they were saying, you know, I'm in desperation. How long do I need to give notice? And I looked on the Scottish Government's website and I couldn't work out whether it was just 2 months, whether it was 3 months, whether it was 84 days, whether it was 36 days, whether it was 28 days. It's like I had no idea.
Whether it's 84 days plus the postage, and yeah,
it's absolutely crazy. And then at what point, how do you do this process and how do you go through that? Now I've got to admit though, eviction is the last port of call.
yeah,
But he's only doing that because he's been forced to do it. A lot of landlords have been forced to do this by the change in legislation, brought in by the Greens, and the SNPs allowed them to do it. I've been very, very reluctant to talk about political parties. The Greens is fine because it's obviously them that's doing it. But I've been very, very reluctant and very nervous to a degree to talk about how the SNP has just allowed them to do it. And just basically, they've not delegated that task to the Greens. They've just abdicated it completely. And only now, Paul, whatever his name is, instead of Shona Robson, has actually been installed, and he's now the housing minister. That role has actually been brought back as a housing minister for housing, and I don't think it was before under Shona Robson. I think it was just like, you could take housing under your portfolio, but it wasn't actually named in her title. But it's actually brought back now. So I think, to a degree, they're maybe trying to take back control, but they've really lost it. They have lost it in terms of the ramifications just further down the road about what's about to come and what's happening right now on the boots on the ground. And they'll not see the implications until later on. It's like the ship leaving the harbour. You know how it leaves the quay and it builds momentum. And this is like what the private sector, rented sector is. It's building momentum in terms of people getting out of the sector. And by the time they notice and the statistics come up on records that a lot of people have actually left the sector, you're too late. The momentum has been built and people have actually left. You're not going to get them back, and you're not going to encourage anybody to come back because of the draconian legislation that's coming in. It's in now, and it's currently getting put in even more. John Black was on the other day when I was sitting at the Fife SAL meeting, and he was saying there's no doubt about it that rent caps are here to stay.
Yeah.
And in some shape or form, and how they evolve that we do not know. But I tell you what, for a lot of landlords, it's like I've had enough. It's not me personally, but I've had enough.
Yeah.
It's like, why would I'll just take the money and run? I could do something else with that. Why would I need this hassle and this bother? I'll just take the money and run and go for it. Anyway, this doesn't really go on about the fact.
No, but I think while we're on here, it's relevant to kind of highlight that, and hopefully, like you say, Jim, maybe that is signs that they're trying to rectify the problems that are that we're currently experiencing from what's been put in place by the Scottish Government. But I mean, some of the things like the rent cap and that are here to stay, and that's what's causing the problem for a lot of landlords. And it's a lot of the smaller landlords that just have a couple of properties and they're just like, it's not worth my time anymore. I've seen it on the daily, nearly now. That people are coming to me with that kind of outlook, and that's a shame. But that's how they feel, and once they're gone, you're not going to be able to turn them around. So.
And I'll talk about the wealth creation show on Monday at 12:30. But how my portfolio purchase is going of 30 properties. But there's wee red flags popping up every now and again now, and it's like I'm beginning to swither now because of the impending legislation and more draconian. I'm beginning to swither about thinking, why should I bother? It's like why do I bother? Why am I doing this? What reason?
Yeah, just before we move on then, Jim, obviously you said that you're not in a position where you're like, I want to leave and get out and things, but as that's the feeling for smaller landlords that maybe have just one or two properties and things. You've obviously got a bigger portfolio, you've mitigated for situations that kind of like this, obviously, so that you're fine. What is it that puts you off maybe expanding even further? Do you think it'd be more difficult for you to get yourself in a position where you have mitigated against situations like this, or is it just you're just fed up with trying to deal with it?
No, I don't think it's going to be fed up. It's like, how much more do I need?
Yes.
Right, I'm comfortable is an understatement. I'm extremely comfortable.
Yeah.
I could literally just sit on the beach for the rest of my life and have tens of thousands coming every single year, and I'm not doing anything for it anymore because I've built all that over all the years. Now, that's not as a result of the tenants' income. That's as a result of investment strategy. It's got that. So it's like I've built huge amounts of wealth, and it's the wealth that you could easily live off for the rest of your life, and then you could pass it on to the next generation as well, and they could live off it as well. So why would I need to bother? Why would I go to all that effort? Why would I put myself through that hassle? And you know, it does get to you. However, I've been here before a couple of times. I've been here at the credit.
Well, as you say, that's a wealth creation topic, and we'll probably touch on that again on Monday.
We'll talk about wealth creation. So remember to talk about that on wealth creation show at 12:30 on Monday.
Yeah. So back on topic for this morning, I am choosing the right letting agent and spotting the pros from the cons. Now, while being professional and experienced doesn't always translate to being a high performance agent, it is the essential foundation of a letting agent, and one that you could probably have a lot of faith in. So use some of these things that I'm going to cover just now as must-haves when you're building a shortlist and selecting your future agent, or if you're obviously just starting out, or if you're looking potentially for a new agent. I don't know. But one important thing is a modern and well-functioning website with an active presence on social media and how they showcase your property across multiple different platforms and the ways that they do that. Now, Jim, we're well aware of that, and we have built a lot over the last few years on social media, and the amount of work that's been into the website. I know you spent a lot of time tweaking our website and things to make it what it is, and the amount of traction we get on that, as well as obviously from the social media platforms.
On the face of it, quite interesting, because somebody said to me the other day, it's like, oh, your website's no changed in about 10 years. And it's like, yes,
yes,
you think it's no changed. But on the face of it, you think it's no changed, but the engineering technology behind it has actually changed. And that's how it gets about 430,000 visitors a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost 40,000 every month or thereabouts. It's about 40,000 every month.
We've kept track of that, Jim, for a good few years now, and seen how that's built over the years. The traction.
I remember jumping for joy when we first started at Fife Properties, and we're getting 600 visitors a month.
Yeah,
we're getting 40,000. It's like, wow. Yeah. Now, but that's as a result of clever engineering and content marketing, like what we're doing right now. And Google indexes are very, very high in the rankings because it's modern and it's of today. It's not old, outdated information on that website. So that's why we do all these blogs and vlogs and put all that information on religiously. Because everybody says, God, you spend an awful lot of time doing shows and blogs and vlogs and all the rest of it. You know, how have you got time for me for selling my property or letting my property? And I'm like, you wouldn't believe what system we operate and how we do it. It is phenomenal. But what you see how us doing right now could be a rerun for all they know. Because we could live broadcast without us being there. If that's weird.
I think as well. A lot of years ago, everything would revolve around the one agent. I mean, everything doesn't evolve around me in lettings or you in sales. Or do you know what I mean? There's a whole team, and we all work together in each side of things, and that's how it all functions the way it does.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing. It's like, what is the backing? So you can look at one individual person and think, yeah, I'm going to go with them. But what's backing them up?
Yeah.
What system do they operate? Who's in the background making sure it happens? Because that one person can't be there all the time. And at some point in time, they'll have to take a break or go on holiday. So if you think they're going to be looking after your property all the time, if they're a one-man operation or one-woman operation, then think again, because they're not going to be operating it all the time. So that's why you need a whole load, a team running behind. I mean, a team. Together, everyone achieves more. Effectively, and you know, it's an old cliche, but it's actually true. And there's no I in the team. That's really what it comes down to. So the other one as well is actually the social media websites, like what you said, social media platforms. So we individually go for regions rather than actually for the actual Fife itself, because we go for localized areas, because people live and move within that area. Nobody wants to see a property in Fife on a Dundee platform or vice versa. You know, nobody wants to see a Dundee property in the Fife on a Fife Properties website. It does what it says in the tin, as well as what the social media platforms do as well. I do not want to see a property for, you know, a St Andrews on Dunfermline, for example. And I know we do that with the personal property tours, because that's essential, because some people actually want to move, very rarely, but we don't promote it all the time. That's the only ever time we share different properties on different platforms is with the personal property tour and the link to the website, which drives traffic instantly. And therefore, that's why it's seen and drives traffic, and then we can retarget from there under retargeting technology which is used by all the big corporations, which is what we're using. Homes listed on major property portals, as well as using a price strategies to maximise your audience and generate the most interest, is probably another key one. Engaging with upbeat descriptions. This is quite important. People want to move to a property for the dimensions of the property in the beginning, but more importantly, what lifestyle will it give me when I get there? What's in the area?
I was just going to say the area and what's nearby.
And there's no doubt about it. The next boom area is probably more than likely is Aberhill, because it's right next door to the train station, and there's no other place right next door to the train station really, because at the other side is the swimming pool, the bus station, and the retail park.
The retail park and the high street and things, yeah.
Aberhill is perfectly positioned for that. Train station, retail park, bus station, high street, all the amenities, swimming pool as well, right on your doorstep.
Which works out well for you, Jim.
and as well as the Fife coastal path. I had to mention that and get that in there somewhere.
Yeah, and Leaving Beach. I mean, Leaving's a blue flag beach.
That'll be on my gravestone next to the Fife coastal path.
Yeah, and Leaving Beach. Leaving Beach is beautiful. Leaving into London Links, blue flag, things like that. If you mention that in descriptions, then that gets people's attention.
Engaging upbeat, high quality videos and photographs is probably to inspire tenants to actually view in the first place as well. And an in-depth knowledge of the local market, as we've said, and ever-changing lettings law to help avoid unnecessary, costly and lengthy disputes. If you get it right when somebody moves in the first place, then that's the best thing. Now, a classic example of that recently was I was, May phoned me up and said, we've got a tenant lined up for your property. What's your thoughts on it? And I said, we went through things, and I went, look, because of the legislation that's been put in place, I know they've got a really good job in what they're doing. They've only been in it for about a year, but I'd prefer to have a guarantor along line with it, just in case, because you're at a point where now, if you get a rent arrears, it has to be 6 months before you can do anything about it. And to take a 6-month hit, I don't think anybody can actually take that out there. And that is another absurdity in the law. But that's another story. So that's the sort of things. Appearance as well.
Oh yeah.
Sarah Beanie actually said it once, and I'll talk about it again. I remember her saying it, and this was when I was having a challenging time actually trying to let one of my properties, and it was years ago. It was probably about 15 years ago. And I remember she was on the television and she says to the owner, "Do you know, if you don't love your house when it's presented the way it's presented now, no one else will love it either."
Yeah.
And I tell you what, the penny dropped, because that's what I felt about this property. And then I actually went and did what I needed to do to think, yeah, okay, I would move into that now. And
I would love that,
after that. Yeah, let no bother. I always look at it on the principle that if you would live in it yourself, then someone else will. And you should never be letting a property really that you're not prepared to live in yourself.
I would agree. Definitely. And I think the appearance of the agent themselves as well, in terms of just obviously, the way they dress and how they I mean, if somebody's taken the time in the morning to get up and make themselves presentable and get to work and be, do you know what I mean? Then it says a lot about them as a person. I've seen some agents over the years and they're just thrown together. It's like, that just does not.
This is how they turn up. I mean, we're on a show this morning.
This is Saturday morning. But
this is casual, but to them, this is actually a business attire. The very fact what you've got in the now to them as a business. Oh, I get it, because I'm my own boss and I do what I want. It's like, geez, it's like, what effort do you think you're going to put into my house if you're presenting yourself like that? Because that just doesn't tell me anything. So it kind of really has it really gives away subliminal clues as to you as a landlord or investor, as to say that maybe they're not the right people for me, because they just don't present themselves well, and they don't seem to be that knowledgeable in terms of what they're doing. They don't really have a track. Yeah, they've got the enthusiasm. We'll go back to that thing about the enthusiasm. It's like what you said. This is like the recipe to the perfect cake. When you look at it, expertise is maybe the eggs, enthusiasm is maybe the flour, integrity is maybe the milk, attention to detail is maybe the bicarbonate of soda, depending on what you're doing, and competence is maybe a wee sprinkle of salt to give it that wee bit difference to it. Now, the classic example is, if you take away, for example, expertise, which is the egg, how do you think that cake's going to turn out? It's not going to really take out that well. So you could have 4 of these, but still not have one of them, and you'll just not get that super result that you were going to get at the end. That's probably key and integral to this conversation that we're having right now. It is that that overall, and the sum of the parts is less than the whole itself together. That's when, because they feed off each other, these 5 different things: expertise, enthusiasm, integrity, attention to detail, and competence. And they compound when they're connected together to give you that perfect result at the end. And I think that's really important. And I'm not saying for 1 minute that is us. What I'm saying is it's a constant progressive effort to constantly train to get to that type of level. And that's the type of person you should be looking for.
Yeah, and for me, it definitely is. The key thing is, with knowledge comes confidence. And if your agent is confident in what they're telling you, when it comes to maybe legislation and the whole safety aspect and compliance of the property, which is paramount when you're letting a property, if they're really enthusiastic and confident in what they're telling you and giving you advice, and if they're able to walk around the property and say, like, this is what you need to do here and here, and I mean, we're not qualified electricians or anything like that, but we do have that general knowledge of what needs to be there, and could 9 times out of 10 say, like, that's going to have to be upgraded, or this, do you know what I mean? If they're confident in telling you that,
let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story. Okay, remember the other day, one of the engineers went and said, no, your boiler's got to get changed, 1,500 quid. And I immediately went to them and I immediately said, nah, get the original fitter in the first place. Get them to have a look at it. So they had a look at it and they went, no, we could fix that for 300 quid.
Yeah, it was 330 or something.
That's where knowledge and expertise comes in, and understanding. And that's a learning process. You cannot know that. You just learn it as you go. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's important to get people with track records in this field, because they know that. And that's why it's so important. This is the difference between, you know, getting a painting from somebody that's today. You know, it's maybe not that great. A painting from me, for example, I do a painting and everybody goes, oh yeah, that's wonderful. And then the difference from a painting from Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah. That's the difference between a really good qualified letting agent, understands what they're doing and has the knowledge and expertise and has these 5 different categories, to somebody that's just not got one of these at all. Imagine one that's got maybe not got 2 of them, or even 3 of them, or 4 of them. One that really seems enthusiastic, but they've not got any of them. Like, my God.
Yeah, then you've got a problem. Yeah,
a lot of people do that. My, and I'm going to tell the story, and I'll laugh at it now. But my mother allowed somebody to drive away on my motorbike, and I never ever saw it ever again. And I said, why did you do that? Oh, the boy was nicely presented and he spoke well. And I never saw my bike again, my motorbike. Brand new, RD125. Anyway, that's another story.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, like you say, all these elements, like you're making a cake, you could maybe get away with one of them, but if you're lacking a few of them, you're really in trouble. So yeah, put your agent to test and look for these things. Look for a ray of sunshine, and that's the next thing we're going to talk about. And you don't have to wait to give your property to a letting agent to find that out and find out whether they've got that positive attitude. So before making any choice on a letting agent, think about things like maybe the way they react to your property, and point out the features that light them up, and talk about the perfect tenant and how you would like and how to find them. Now, the thing about like how they react to your property, I think, is really important. And I've got a good example of this actually yesterday. My last appointment yesterday was in Burnt Island. I was in a really nice property. It was a dad's property, and we were walking around, and sadly, he'd only lived, it was a big property, and he'd only lived in a couple of rooms of it. So the rest of it, I says, have you just done all this up? And she's like, no. I was like, it looks like it's brand new. And I walked into the kitchen, and there's a big log burner in the middle. And, you know, and obviously I engaged with her about all these things. And I was excited about the property because I thought this is going to be a brilliant property to bring on. And in turn, she was, and it was a really good appraisal. And I'll have that coming to the market soon.
So the fact that the log burner in the kitchen sets it all.
Yeah, when I walked in and seen it, I thought, God, we're on a good one here. You're going to definitely find somebody really good for this, and it'll really attract with the right pictures and description and listing and obviously like social media presence. We're going to get a really good tenant in here.
The classic example of that the other day, somebody I was actually saying I could never get in touch with the lens department. It's like, okay, let me give you an example of what's happening right here. 89 people applied for Mill Street in Kirkcaldy.
Yeah.
you know, and that's just one property. So, and you could go, oh my God, the rental market's overheating. We need to do something about this. It's like, no, that's just quite normal. The key is only about 4 or 5 people got to actually visit it and actually see it, because the other ones just weren't right for that type of property, or they didn't have the right circumstances. For example, you know, they just might have not filled out the form properly. They might have not done something else properly, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, if this is going to be a problem at the beginning, just filling out forms, this is going to be a problem in the tenancy. And when I've got to say to tenants out there, when you're competing against 8 to 9 other people, then you've got to make sure you're on point as well in order to get the property you really want. You know, that's a fact. You can, you know, people can actually cast it, oh, that's no fair and all the rest of it. Hey, newsflash, life's no fair. Everybody loves you when you're in the house and in your family unit, but as soon as you walk out that door, it's a completely different picture.
And do you know what? When you've got that volume of interest in one property, I've had it before, and people come back and it's like, oh, like they feel kind of we're against them and we're cherry picking better people. I mean, I got to the nitty gritty with some of them, no in this instance, but in previous. And it says, okay, right, so have you done this? Did you fill in the questions? Did you do this? No, I've not done that yet. And I'm like, well, that's why you've not been able to progress. So,
you know, why have you not got the job? Well, you never put a CV in.
Yeah, basically.
That's essentially what it is. So, you know, you don't have to wait until you give their property, you know, property a letting agent to find out whether you've got a positive, whether they've got a positive attitude. But before making this choice, these are probably the things I would more importantly look out for. The way they react to your property, point out the features, light them up, and all the rest of it, like you've done right now, Richard. Their phone or email manner when you book a valuation, when you're actually saying, could you come out and see me? Also, another one as well is, does the letting agent actually give them your direct details, their direct contact? That's quite important. Well, some letting agents, quite a lot of them actually say, oh, well, just phone the office when you've got, you know, when you're
rather than their mobile.
It's like, you don't want direct contact. It's like, that tells me straight away, you're putting a barrier in front of you and I. It's like, you've got one of my biggest tax-free assets, or one of my biggest assets here, and my biggest investments, and you're looking after it for me, and I can't even speak to you direct. I think we've got a problem. That'll be a big no then to that person. So it's important that you actually are able to get in touch with them, you know, potentially in emergency situations at any point in time, or their property management division as well. So phone number, email manner, booking the valuation. You could also pose as a tenant. You could also pose as a tenant, inquire about the property, and see how they come across from that point of view, and what their criteria is and what their vetting system is. Get an experience of that, because then you'll be able to do that. I used to do that all the time with other agents, by the way. And and I tell you what, I still do that today. They have no idea what I'm doing. They think I'm actually just inquiring about a property, but no, I'm actually understanding how their system, how their supposed system works.
How their system differs from ours.
Some of them go on about, we've got a system. No, you've not got a system. You've just got something that you've pieced together when something happens. That's not a system. That's not a 60-point checklist like we've got for a property journey all the way start to finish. That's not what that's a system. But
it's actually 100 points.
Is it? Okay. So that's a really good one. Your feelings about the prospect of them being your letting agent, are you filled with excitement and confidence, or do you feel like just another number? That's an important thing as well. Enthusiasm is like sunshine and totally infectious. If your letting agent is enthusiastic about your property and towards their customers, it gives you a lift, rubs off on the tenants, and makes everything more enjoyable. That's the point, and that's exactly why you said that. Looking for a ray of sunshine. This is what that's all about. What about tackling things like the trust issue, Richard? What should we do about that? Because there's, trust is earned. So what should we do about that whole thing?
Trust is earned when people do what they say, and they'll do and exceed the expectations of somebody. The same is true for letting agents. It's the same as in life as it is for a letting agent. And there are a lot of little clues that could help you gauge the integrity before committing to work with a letting agent. Now, this is something that I always try and get, and it's like turning up on time for a valuation. Now, for me personally, I don't like to be early and I don't like to be late. I like to be on time. Some people are like, oh, be early. And it's like, no, because some people don't like you to be early. They want you to be on time. So if you're waiting on an appointment, you're expecting them at 11 o'clock and they turn up at 10 to 11, it's like, it's a bit you've put me out here. I was expecting you in 10 minutes.
And equally, if they turn up late, it's like, well, how much respect do you have for my time?
Yes.
One of the most important commodities, never mind money, one of the most valuable commodities you've ever got is time.
Yes.
It is something you can get money back anytime you want. That's a fact, because you can just go there and get it, because there's an abundance in the system. But you'll never get back time. And somebody that wastes your time doesn't need your attention. Yeah. I would say that straight away. Now, quite an important one for me is sometimes I'm, kind of on the wire every single time. So I quite happily just phone people and say, look, I'm on the Collinsborough Street.
Yeah, it happens.
And I'll be with you. I'm about 2 minutes, 3 minutes away from you, because I'm maybe going to St. Monans. I'm on the Collinsborough Street. I'm going through Abercrombie. I'll be at St. Monans in about 2 or 3 minutes. And they're like, but you'll be here on time. And I says, but it's just in case I'm about 30 seconds late. And when you turn up on time, it's like, wow, you didn't even need to call me. It's like, but it was just in case.
Just in case, yeah.
It's genuinely, I have a real thing about people using my time and actually not valuing what I do. That is a real big thing for me. After all, I'm giving it freely at that point in time and giving my advice freely as well. And literally what I've said to them before I've even started the journey has actually made me worth my fee in the first place. They're literally getting me for nothing once they want to sign up, because of everything I've told them before. So I'm very, very vigilant about who I'll go out to now and who I'll advise now, because my time is so important to me. And equally, I expect other people should value it like that as well.
That's a good point, Jim. And I think, like you say, for yourself, and I think for any agent who's knowledgeable, and that initial appointment, you're giving them all that information, and there should be a lot of information there that is extremely helpful for them in the journey at that initial point, where your time, you're not paying for that time at that point. So the valuation is so important. And if you've got an agent who's going to fill it with really useful information and helpful information at that point, then, like you say, Jim, moving forward, then you should be confident that they're the agent to work with.
It's ideally the same with every single estate agent. I mean, I know every single estate agent out there says, free valuations and all the rest of it, and then you get 20 estate agents out. But the reality is you're actually using the time of 19 other estate agents. And you've got to question yourself and say to yourself, is that really the most important thing I should be doing, or should I be picking the best 2 or 3 and getting one of these out? But actually, just for most people, and I'll say it, I'm actually surprised that I actually get other people called out with me. And you obviously, sometimes I say to myself, you obviously don't see where the added value is in what I do, and what I'm actually advising, and you obviously don't understand where I am right now in terms of the top 1% in Britain, in terms of the wealthiest in Britain. And to me, it's like, would somebody not value that? Because I certainly would. I've been working for years to get around people like that and trying to get their time and just basically playing them and actually paying thousands to get these people's time, that type of person's time. So when I see it and other people using other people's time, I just think that's that's maybe the right thing to do. You should actually be valuing what they do, especially if they've got that wealth of experience in these 5 different points we talked in the beginning. So trust is earned, as you'd said there. And the same true for letting agents. What's the little clues then that you've got to gauge the integrity? Commitment to work, because this is actually wee clues that gives away the situation.
So as we say, obviously turning up for the valuation on time. If you're going to be late, always notify them. Like you say, Jim, if you're in the car and you're running a bit late, give them a phone and say, I'm just on my way. Also, following up and confirming your valuation and what you've discussed, and maybe your terms of business and things in writing, and the time frame that you promised them. Do you know what I mean? If it's prior to the valuation and you're going to send them stuff ahead of time, do that as you've promised. If it's following the valuation, you're like, right, I'll send you this and I'll send you this maybe by tomorrow. Don't wait to the end of the week and think, oh, I'll go the last minute, I'll send you it. It's not a good impression. And also, if they spend their time criticising other local agents, now, that is one thing I don't like to do in an appraisal. I don't reference other agents. I never do to a landlord. It's not kind of what I would do. And some people do it in an attempt to win business from people, and that's not a good impression to give.
It's an easy card to play. An easy card to play. However, you know yourself, most of the people that use us, do that for us anyway. It's no difficult, because they've used someone else before, and then they come to us, use us, and it's a completely different experience. And for the majority of people that actually do that, and then they go, God Almighty, you don't know what you don't know until you've used it, I suppose. And it's like you think the grass is you think you've got it until you see something else and you think, wow, I never realised that was possible, or people did things like that, or they did all these extras for you, or they did outside hours, emergency calls, or they did weekend viewings, or they did nighttime viewings, or it's that sort of thing. And it's these little things that make a fundamental difference in getting your property filled. And for that is very trustworthy, for one thing. But for that is very important as well, because the quicker you get your property filled with the right tenant and right qualified tenant, is the quicker your property is earning money, so you can reinvest back in the property and grow the capital wealth, but also look after the tenant as well. That's key. The tenant is the most important person in that property, because they're the one that pays the rent. It actually keeps the property going and actually increases the value. Just like, for example, all the retailers. There's no surprise that Sports Direct, the guy who owns Sports Direct is no daft. He goes about and buys real estate and he fills it with his shops. And ideally, he makes a profit off of the shops, but more importantly, he's got a huge real estate portfolio that he services he services the debt on that portfolio to leverage his position with the money he's earning from them shops. Newsflash, what do you think I do?
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing. That's what most successful people do in the property investment business.
Yeah, good advice there, Jim. But using
it's a bit
sorry,
this is about wealth creation, isn't it?
It is a wee bit actually, but it's just. But I think it's because you and I do the show for wealth creation, so it's in our kind of mind all the time. But yeah, I mean, if that kind of discussion interests you and you're watching this, tune in on a Monday to Jim and I at 12:30, and we cover wealth creation topics, and it is really good, and it's a really interesting thing to listen to and take in if you are an investor and building a portfolio and trying to create your own wealth.
An example of what happened, it was years ago. I do remember a property in Dyser. I mean, we had taken the property in Dyser, and it wasn't the greatest property that the person had actually given us. They'd not done what they're meant to do and what they're promised to do at the beginning, because they said, oh, I'll get this done, I'll get that done, we'll get this done, we'll have it looking pristine. I thought, yeah, okay, we can let that no bother. And then it was like, it wasn't a letting. It was like, how is this no letting? Because he's not even done the things he was meant to do. So it's like, we've taken on that principle. And ideally, what we should have done, now in hindsight, it was like drop that person like a stone, because it's like, if you're not going to do that at the beginning, you're probably going to do that with the repairs as well when it comes to anything that's needing done with the tenant when they're in. But luckily, it didn't actually, it didn't get the traction it should have got. Now, this was, when the market was a lot quieter than it is now. And what happened was they actually went with another agent, because they were showing cameras and they were going around and saying, this is my tour for today and all the rest of it. I mean, we do that on some shape or form right now, and we focus on that, but not as good as what we're doing right now. And he felt he wanted to move to this agent because he felt they were so enthusiastic. And then consequently, about a year later, he came back to me and says, can I come back?
Yeah, I know.
And I was like, no.
These are the things that I think you learn maybe the hard way and through, like you say, through a learning curve. And there's properties now, and if I meet people and I'm like, right, okay, like you need to do this, you need to do this, and if they're like, okay, right, I'll get that done and get onto it, then that's fine. But if they don't make that effort, I'm like, unfortunately, unless this is done, I'm not going to list this property.
I like to think that we've got a set of landlords on our books that actually think like me and invest like me and want to provide a really good service. And when it comes to the tenants' welfare, they prioritise that over their own profits.
Yeah, and I think that if you've got a landlord who's not really in that mindset and doesn't have that element of compassion and care towards the tenant, and then you've got a problem.
And what I mean by profits is, in other words, they don't try to squeeze everything out of it. What they're trying to do is they're happy with a decent return. They're happy with a decent return, so they're happy to put a significant amount back into the property, and looking after the tenant, to give them a really good standard of property and for them to live in. After all, we're providing at the house, they make it a home.
Yes, definitely.
Let's talk about things like we've kind of spoke about a bit, comedy errors, avoiding them, getting things right and being thorough costs, nothing at all really, I suppose. And when your letting agent pays attention to detail, it makes a world of difference, doesn't it? It ends up ends up who's actually going to be living in the property and how profitable it's going to be. So look at things like their letters and contracts. Ask to get a standard letter and contract. Are they clear and easy to understand? Are they difficult to read and full of spelling mistakes? That's a real dead giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah.
Process of referencing, how they do inventories. Incidentally, quite a lot of people do inventories in-house, but inventories are meant to be done externally, because when it comes to a disagreement with the First Two Tribunal or the Safe Deposit Scotland or any intensive deposit scheme, they will look more favourably on an independent inventory inspection than they will of the person doing them themselves, because they think, well, you could just, there's a kind of conflict of interest there, with the fact that you're doing your own inventory and it's about an impartial subject.
It's a kind of conflict if you're doing them yourself.
It is. So how do they get their best tenants and protect you in cases of disputes as well? That's quite an important one. I always say to people, I used to get the old thing about, being a letting agent is money for old rope. If you get the right tenant, you just coin it in every single month. And I'm going, well, okay. But I kind of look at people's property management fees as an insurance policy. I mean, yes, you're getting the service and all the rest of it, and sometimes you might think it's money for old rope and, this is all going swimmingly well, but the reason the tenancy is going swimmingly well is because the letting agent is running it properly with the tenant. That's why it's going well. And some landlords, very few, will go, oh, you better give me it back because it's going really well and I could save my money on the fees. And I'm like, are you nuts?
And then they come back to you a couple of months later.
Yeah, it's going to take about 4 hours to sort anything that goes wrong with the fact that they're going to have to phone you, you're going to have to phone them, you're going to have to phone a contractor, they're going to have to phone you back, they're going to have to organise, and then you're going to have to phone the tenant, you're going to have to organise it with them when the contractor gets in, and then if the tenant isn't there, then you're going to have to organise that all over again, and then you're going to have to get the repair done, then you're going to have to check the repair to see if the repair's right before you actually pay for it. See how that process could take ages just to do one little thing. And this could be something like the handle on the bathroom door is broken. It could be as simple as that. And you go down to B&Q, and this is how most people think, the broke thinking thing. Oh, that just cost like £10 to get a new handle. Why am I getting charged 40 quid for that? Do you know how much effort and expertise actually goes into getting into somebody's house and organising and arranging it with them, taking my van around,
people involved and
fitting that whole thing so it doesn't actually come off next time, and actually buying it from the shop as well, and then actually driving the way back home. And then that's when you realise that's why it's essential to get a good letting agent and checkups, references, inventories. How do you get the best tenants, and how do you protect yourself in case of disputes are most important. Presentation advice as well. Do they look for opportunities at your property to improve your income and increase the value you're getting? You've just done that with me with Mill Street.
Yeah. I do that, and it's like I walk around to like, this carpet could be jewelry coming up, or you could touch up this paint needs touched up. Just simple things that are going to make the world of difference when people walk in here, or even in the listing.
And now I'm getting 10% more than I usually get. With the new tenants moving in, because they are quite happy. And more importantly, for the sake of just doing that, what you've done is literally increased my rent by 10% for the new person moving in. Happy days. I mean, there's no doubt about it though, and I'll just say that the factor fees on that property have actually gone up as well, so that compensates for that.
I've just seen that.
So I pay the factor fees, which are actually quite a lot of money in comparison. So that's the offset there. So everybody gets a win-win situation out of that whole thing. Airtight admin, and that's where we're saying it. Airtight admin and enlightening advice sets the good letting agents apart. So don't be scared to ask them how they handle things behind the scenes to get a fuller picture on what they're actually doing. Here's the one for me, Richard, and we've talked about a wee bit, is question their capabilities.
Definitely.
This is a big thing, isn't it? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think it's really good to put your agent on the spot and definitely question their capabilities. I mean, competence. I mean, the dictionary defines competence as the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. So for letting agents, that comes down to the way they set up for things like maybe ensuring that all your safety, and obviously safety is a big thing for me, safety inspections and certificates for your electric, your gas, your smoke alarms, your energy efficiency are all kept up to date and in line with the law. It's something that just, it's always been, you taught me this, and we've always been taught in training, and it's paramount when you're letting a property, is the safety aspect. So it's something that I always make sure that it's in place, and your agent should be doing that. I mean, it's leaving you wide open if they don't.
I see it sometimes when I'm buying portfolios and when I'm buying other properties. We've seen it in the past, haven't we? When I bought these 20 properties, about 2 years ago, and a lot of these properties were actually managed by other letting agents. And when we got them over, we said, well, here's the EICR, the EPC, and the gas safe certificate. And they're like, oh, we'll get them done.
It's like, so you didn't already have them in place.
Sorry?
Crazy.
You're a letting agent and you've not got any of these things done. My God. I could not believe that, Richard. This was quite a lot of them. And this is letting agents that have been around for a lot of years that have this experience and expertise. Even the one I'm doing right now with the 30 I'm buying right now, it's like there's a lot of them, like EPCs weren't done, EICRs weren't done, some of the gas wasn't done. And it's like, my God, this is a business you're running, not a hobby. It's people's lives and you're dealing with. So you have to make sure that you have everything covered. Everything is placed in a place for everything.
Yeah. I was just going to say that the pending purchase that you're talking about, your 30, we noticed obviously a lot of the ICRs and things, some of them weren't in place and some of them were going to just run out, and it's like, that's a big expense, and it's also a big safety issue as well, and obviously it's been overlooked or ignored, which is even worse. But yeah,
it's a lot to do with, well, Richard, that I genuinely think this person doesn't have the money, because Section 24 is basically killing them. It's like all the properties are in their name, they can't do anything about it. And Section 24, literally, I think the interest on the rent was something like maybe about touching £100,000. That instantly says that they've got to be a high rate taxpayer before they start. So they're literally going to be looking at an extra bill of round about 20% of 60, about £12,000 extra. They'll never be able. It's a loss. As soon as interest rates go up in that environment, you're making a loss. There's a huge difference. If your interest rate is at 3%, you'll be kind of making a wee bit of profit. If it goes to about 5%, you'll start to break even. And then when it goes to in the Section 24, if it's all in your name, when it goes to about 8%, you're making a loss continually every single time. That's the time just to exit and sell your properties, and that's you on your way. That means that instantly everything's been cut back, and you've got that's a decrease in the rental supply, which the government can't afford to have right now. But they're going to pay the price for this.
Yeah. But yeah, if you've got an agent, you need to ensure that they are confident and competent in making sure that your property is compliant and meets the safety regulations. If they're not, then that's a big red flag. So also how they handle inventories, using a third-party contractor to do that is the best way forward. Dealing with your security deposits, your renewals, your rent reviews, and also a really important one, if you're in that position, like we say, it's last choice, worst case scenario, but serving notices if there's a dispute or there's an issue where you need to bring the tenancy to an end. If your paperwork's not right and your tenant and landlord are not served the proper paperwork, and your agent's not doing that correctly within the law and the guidelines, then that's a recipe for disaster as well. You've just the First Tiers Tribunal will just throw that out in the bin.
Look what's happening right now with the legislation that's going on. It takes you six months rent being outstanding before you can actually serve an eviction notice. Okay, so the tenant just needs to keep it under 6 months all the time, and you've lost all that money, and you've got to support that, and then they can just pay the rent from then on. So they could have 6 months in arrears and you can't do a damn thing about it if it's just below it. But equally, if it just goes over 6 months, then you've got to apply, you've got to serve the notice, you've got to then notify the local authority as well at the same time, or it's not a valid notice. So if you don't do that, you're screwed. And then by that notice is served, you've got to wait probably about 2 or 3 months before that's actually done. And that way, the tenant's still not paying your rent, by the way, because you're now 9 months in with no rent. And then once you get that served, and once it goes, and if it does get granted by chance, then what's going to happen is it now takes about a month to get the sheriff officers to go round. Now, the sheriff officers go round and they serve the notice, but equally what they do as well is they go, we'll look at your circumstance. Instead of being a week now, what they're doing is we'll come back in a month's time. So now you're almost a year out of rent. How many landlords do you think can afford to do that? Very,
Not a
very
lot.
few. And I've got that one right now, where it's like that, where the court and the sheriff officers are deliberately delaying and dragging their feet with it because they've been told to do it to decrease evictions, so the Scottish government or the SNP and the Greens don't look bad, because eviction numbers will go up.
With that one, Jim, obviously the tribunal extended that, and then obviously the sheriff's officers extended it, and it's just this time.
So everybody's had a shot at extending it, and this is why it's so important to be able to deal with these issues at point. Now, this is probably one in, God, I've been doing this for 30 years, and literally, I think I'm maybe on to the second hand, but I'm no more than 10 evictions in 30 years.
Oh, no.
And through the courts, most people have actually just understood, and they know they're not doing something right, or they know they're wrong in what they're doing. So they've just gone and, look, I'm sorry, Jim, I will move out, and they move because they understand that. They're honest, they're upfront with it. But most of the time, I actually tried to keep them by actually just giving them a buy and just saying, look, as long as you get your rent on track, we'll just keep that to the side. We'll deal with that issue later on of the rent arrears, but just get your rent back on track. The object of the exercise is to keep a roof over your head, make sure you're looked after. You do have nowhere else to go, because there's nowhere else for you to go, to be honest, because of your circumstances. And that's mostly what I'll try to do in all the things. But equally as well, a lot of tenants actually just end up moving out because they feel embarrassed about the fact that I'm trying to help them, and lo and behold, they're still not able to keep up to that with that help. And it's nice of them. I would still love to find some sort of mechanism. Yourself, we try Homes for Good, Trust in Fife, all the support facilities and stakeholders involved in this that will help them get help to get themselves back on their feet. So we go to these people to get
like private rented solutions, isn't it?
Yeah. And look what happened with that one we just talked about, whereas we're now into about over 12 months and they're delaying through the courts and that. She got help, and she got all the money to pay her rent off, her rent arrears in total, and pay it all off to me, and she went and spent it again.
She spent it,
spent it again.
Which leaves you then.
The irony is the courts are still protecting her. Yeah. That's amazing, isn't it? And she went and they know that. She got that money all over again to get her rent arrears cleared, so she could keep a roof over her head and her children's head, and she went and spent it all again.
Yeah, because private rented solutions wouldn't help her any further, because they made us aware, look, she's had the money and she's spent it, so we can't do any more for her. So then that leaves us.
To be honest, as a private landlord, it's not my duty to absorb that.
No.
It's the duty of maybe the local authority with council housing, because that's what they're there for, and they're a bigger organisation that can take that sort of hit. But in smaller landlords, you've got no chance. They can't survive like that. That's why they're exiting the market. So that's why it's so important to make sure you understand the person that's serving the notice and the disputes. We're members of SAL as well. All the team are registered with SAL for their helpline. That's the Scottish Association of Landlords. I'm actually, Elaine and I are independent landlord members.
You've got your own.
We've got our own membership as well, because we believe that knowledge and experience and expertise, it changes all the time. We've always got that support from them for the information and education that they can give us and represent us as almost like our own union. That's what we need just now, somebody to stand up for us and fight for us. And that's why SAL and the NRFL, which is the National Residential Landlords Association, and the Scottish Owners Business Property Rural Association, that's the farm cottages and stuff like that, they're all taking the Scottish Government to court on a judicial review for their cost of living cap on rent and moratorium on evictions, as it being completely unfair. So if you're out there and you're an investor or a landlord and you've not contributed to that fund yet, please go onto the Scottish Association of Landlords website and actually contribute anything you can to this. We need everybody to come in on this. We need these funds. It's going to cost over £100,000 or more to defend this and get this judicial review through if it's granted to go ahead. We'll only know that in June or July, more than likely. It's going to be heard in next month. It's going to be heard next month, but we're only going to find out the result of that in a couple of months after that. And it's going to be all hands to the pumps, and we need as much funds as possible. We have not got, and one landlord and one association doesn't have all that money themselves. one of these challenges with the National Landlords Association, which I was the chairman for several years for Scotland, they almost went under when they challenged the government, the UK government, on something else. It might have been Section 24. They almost went under, or direct payment to landlords, and that almost brought them to their knees. And they ended up having to merge with the National Residential Landlords Association because they had no funds left. The government let them dry. The government's got people employed full time for that. So we need to actually represent ourselves. We need to all put into that. It's an important thing to do.
Yeah. That fund is very important, Jim. I would agree with you 100%. And I also think SAL is such a good, I've got a lot of confidence in them as a reference point if you're unsure about things, as opposed to just checking the government website, as we've already spoke about. It does kind of contradict itself. So yeah, and then back to obviously capabilities and competence and things, how an agent cares for your property, or they manage your property with a circle of reputable contractors to deal swiftly with maintenance and repairs and emergencies and things as well. That's so important to us. We have built over the years a really good contractors list, people that we trust and people that will do things on the drop of a hat for us. Sometimes I've got contractors that will go out, and
I thought it was
can't put a price on that.
We used to get castigated. I remember somebody phoning me up one time and saying to me, "Why have you not got Scottish Gas on all your properties?" And I went, "Well, Scottish Gas won't go out on a weekend, and my contractor will." "Oh, of course they do." And then I went, "Well, look on their website under their emergency package scheme. They just give you advice at the weekend. They actually don't come out. So unless it's between 9 and 5, they ain't coming out to see you. They'll just give you advice over the phone. Where our contractors come out on a Saturday, Sunday, and any time of day, literally night and day. So it's a completely different type of service. But equally as well, like what you said, Richard, we've had some contractors for a lot of years, and what's happened is they've brought other people in with them, to help them out, and they've just gone by the wayside. So essentially, we've just had to drop them. One recently, it did a flat roof for me, and it was appalling. So they'll never see the light of day with other tenancies now, for that very reason, because we just don't feel that they're a right fit for our model, our business model now, in terms of the service that we need and the quality of the product and service that they provide. So it evolves. We have real core contractors, but sometimes even some of these core contractors fall off the end and they're out. And if you're out, you're out. You're not coming back. I'm saying you're not coming back really, but we do give a lot of people before we actually say you're out, don't we? We give them a lot of chances. I seem to be the person that gives everybody the most chances. And everybody keeps saying, "Why are you not getting rid of them?" It's like, well, people change. Sometimes they just don't. You just have to accept it.
Yeah, but it is important. Contractors, especially when you're managing tenancies and properties and trying to take that completely as an agent, and imagine agent, take that burden and the time away for the owner landlord and give them their time back if they've been self-managing or they don't want to self-manage. That's the whole purpose of you being in place, and contractors help you do that. Good contractors, reliable contractors.
One of my bits of advice for people right now, if they're self-managing and you're thinking about exiting, is because you think that the hassle is too much, speak to us, because often us doing it and the wealth that you build over the medium to long term as a result of staying in the market, it's all about. I will actually talk about that on the Wealth Creation Show on Monday, about how important it is. I was just about to say all these things there, but I thought we'll save that till Monday, because it's really so poignant in that situation. But for people that are actually considering exiting at this point, and you think it's just a hassle, then why do you not just speak to a letting agent anyway, or speak to us about it if you're in Fife, and we'll talk to you about if there's a price we can manage it for you, so at least we take all the hassle off you, and you're still building wealth over that longer period of time, and still keeping a hold of the asset. Because I'd still say there's nothing else out there it can make the income or develop the income like long-term, medium to long-term income like what property does. There's nothing.
Yeah. Well, in the blog that's attached, and the link that's attached to this video today, Jim, is my email and my direct mobile, not the office. So feel free, anybody that's watching, you could contact me. But in regards to the topic of choosing a letting agent today, I think it's really important to put them to task. If you're choosing a letting agent, put them to task, ask them all these questions, look for all these signs that we've covered today, whether it's their website, how they present themselves, and how they are enthusiastic in how they react to your property and yourself, and the whole process as well. I mean, there's a lot of signs that we've covered today to help you pick the right agent for you. Now, we've got a few comments coming through. Thanks, Angela Morning, for watching. She says it's really all about listening to your agent, as the advice is genuine and packed full of golden knowledge to getting the maximum return. That also builds the client relationship, and the landlord can put full trust in their agent, and it does. Yeah.
Christmas Day call-outs.
Yeah.
That does. We have contractors that will do Christmas Day call-outs. I've been on a Christmas Day call-out as well, where somebody actually sat on the radiator, it fell off the wall, and then when I went round to sort it, I couldn't get a contractor out, so I just bent the end over to cut off the water so it didn't pour out. And then they all sat around and subsequently said to me, "So how's your Christmas so far?" And I went, "How do you think?" They weren't very great tenants at that, to be honest. That's not the type of person I have now, but this was several years ago. I just remember that story about out on Christmas morning because of that. I was just appalled where they're all sitting round, drinking away and having a great time.
Yeah.
And it's only because they sat on the radiator, which they shouldn't have been doing, and they knew that. And then that happened, and it's like they're saying, "How's your Christmas so far?"
Yeah.
So that's what reminds me of that. But then that's sort of what it's all about, going out and making it happen. Making it happen instead of watching it happen, or some people will just wonder what the heck happened.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think that's us for this morning, Jim.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing me on.
Yeah, thanks for all your insights, and thanks everybody who's joined in and commented and watched this morning. If you see it on the reruns, please feel free still to jump in the comments. We will try and respond to them. And as I said, the blog is attached to this video in that link, and my direct email and direct mobile is there if you have any questions. So feel free to contact me anytime.
Perfect.
Right, okay. Right, thanks guys, and thanks for joining, Jim. Bye.
Bye-bye.